Hello everyone, this is update for April 9, 2024, day 776 of the war, and of the date update. Now this is also catch up for all those days since April 3rd when I made last video. And I apologize for not providing regular update. I needed to take some break, personal break. Now I'm back in a saddle, ready to continue, and we'll continue at the regular schedule. So I think I'm gonna just jump right away in the situation on the battlefield. I think because that's the most important part, the most sort of interesting part. So first, I want to a little bit talk about this building defensive line along the state border that's being done by Ukrainian government together kind of with the Ukrainian military. And this is you probably see on the news this dragon tees, trenches, all of that stuff is being built, and unfortunately, it's completely misguided and completely wrong. This is actually a perfect example of absence of critical thinking and generally low intelligence in Ukrainian political top and Ukrainian military top. The reason I'm saying this is the only reason they're building it because they saw that Russian side did it in the summer of they built it before summer, so let's say spring 2023 they built it, and then so-called Ukrainian offensive, which was not real offensive, I mentioned this many times before, failed, and it appeared that it failed because of this defensive line, the Surovikin line, whatever you call it, at that time. And that was actually the result, that there was a conclusion that the Ukrainian attempt at offensive failed because of Surovikin line was inability to honestly admit its own mistakes on Ukrainian side. So the blame was shifted to the Surovikin line, and then basically this incorrect line of thinking was extrapolated, and therefore there was conclusion, we're going to build the same thing and it will protect us from this Russian offensive. That's, I believe, is not really happening, but nevertheless, from this Russian offensive, and it will fail phenomenally the way Ukrainian desperate attack attempts failed in the summer of 2023, really in June of 2023. Then the rest of it was just agony. So this is, as I stated before, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is, I will explain first. I'll go back and explain why it did not work for Ukrainian side. It did not work for Ukrainian side because there was no concentration of military forces. There was no artillery concentration. There is no coordination between artillery and attacking forces. There is no real. It was again peasants' army attack, completely, senseless, mindless, just push without really any thinking. And again, as I stated, not concentrated push even. And so that's really why it failed. Not because that Surovikin line was great. It was actually pretty mediocre, I would say, on the lower end, let's put it this way. And the other reason it failed was actually Russians' forces' extensive use of anti-tank missiles. And they were effective, and they worked really great. And they use actually special forces brigades. I mentioned it's here 22nd Special Forces Brigade, 14. So basically, they put them on a line of attack, and they effectively destroyed most of the Ukrainian attacking armored vehicles. And so that was sort of how that whole attempt got derailed, destroyed. So it was really problem in Ukrainian command. And just general Ukrainian army, poor organization. Well, actually, I would say absence of organization. So, going back to this defensive lines that Ukrainian political top, military top are building, mostly political top. This is driven by political top to show for internal propaganda we're doing something and it's going to be safe and we will protect you, which is always in. None of that is true. It's all basically falsehoods that are being fed to Ukrainian population, Ukrainian citizens. The reason I'm saying it's going to fail completely, phenomenal, and pretty quickly is because the way Russian troops are attacking, they are developed strategy for easily destroying rigid defensive lines. First of all, they use gliding bombs, so everybody hears about them. They will easily destroy all of those defensive lines, easily, and they cheap. Russian side can use a lot of them. So this is not going to cost much to destroy. It actually, again, it will backfire even from economic perspective. Building all of those defensive lines will probably cost more than actually destroying them. So Russia effectively will have sort of double win here. So that's one thing. The second, with all of the problems in Russian army, they starting to learn how to concentrate resources, how to concentrate troops on a narrow section of the front line, and actually use strong artillery support for that specific section of the front line. So they're kind of learning, they're moving away from this peasants' army slowly. It's still not terribly far away, but it's, let's say, a couple steps away from it. And that's enough to overcome Ukrainian army, which is still stuck in a peasants' stage. And so, and that's really the answer to all of this, that's going to be disastrous. If this were to happen, I don't believe this is happening. Russian side simply does not have resources to start attack anywhere, in this Sumy or Kharkiv region, because you really need at least 500,000 soldiers, at the minimum 300, and at 300 you're probably not gonna get much. And again, if Russian side is sort of winning right now, at least psychologically, there is strong, there is strong feeling of that, and losing again will actually completely derail Russian effort as well. So it may lead to basically complete stalemate. So, or at least internal upheaval inside of Russia, social upheaval, because then Russian political top will need to conscript many more people, and that's always going to be popular inside of Russia. So again, this is a perfect example of incompetence of Ukrainian political top, and then military top, and then this, and how this is all plays into primitive populism that's being fed to Ukrainian population and citizens, and who are really lack critical thinking to really realize that's probably not what's really needed, not what's really working. But unfortunately, majority is happy to listen, happy to sort of hear positive fairy tales that come down. And unfortunately, that's going to be a problem down the road. Now let's switch to walk through the front line. I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. So the situation along the state border remains more or less sort of normal in quotes, basically typical. There's obviously exchanges of all sorts of fire and everything, but there is no imminent sign of any kind of Russian military invasion, specifically towards Kharkiv. That's the situation there. Although Russian side, Russian military is attacking Kharkiv mercilessly, specifically more sort of civilian part of the Kharkiv, which they prior to that they refrain from it, or at least they try to minimize and avoid. This is unfortunately also misguided outcome. It's outcome of misguided decisions by Ukrainian political top that decided to attack Russian Belgorod for, again, propaganda, internal propaganda reasons, to kind of make Ukrainian population feel like, okay, Russians are suffering too. Well, Russian side responded because they can with equivalent response toward Kharkiv. So now Ukrainian citizens are suffering in the same way. So again, this didn't solve anything, and this is a typical approach of Ukrainian political top that's really doing this like short-term disastrous populist moves that really put Ukraine in a worse and worse and worse situation overall. Now, actually, sorry to sort of sidetrack. Now I'm going to go back to the walking through the front line. In the next area is going to be North Luhansk front line. So things here are fairly quiet. There is some pretty weak Russian pressure along this road towards Kupiansk, and the same pressure in this village Terny, but so far no Russian advances here, simply because the pressure is not strong enough. That's really the simple answer to it. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Northern sector is fairly quiet. The only active area is this Bilohorivka, where Russian troops are putting pressure. They slowly, 100 meters, whatever, 50 meters over a week, they advancing, but it's fairly slow advance there. Now let's look at the situation around west of Bakhmut, and now it's more sort of headlines such as Chasiv Yar. So what's really happening here is that Russian troops use that new strategy that I mentioned before, where they concentrate large amounts of armored vehicles, up to 50, and all of them attack, and up to a third of them get lost in the process of attack, but it allows to breach Ukrainian defenses and capture new territories. Russian side cannot obviously do these attacks every day, because they simply cannot sustain those losses. But over time, once a week, once in 2 weeks, they can sort of afford it, if I can use that word, to do this kind of things and advance in that way. Prior to this attacks, they obviously use gliding bombs, artillery to attack, soften Ukrainian defenses. The other, actually, I want to mention one other thing is that this time, the way Russian side is attacking, they don't have enough artillery shells. It's totally not how it used to be in the summer of 2022, when they just shelled whatever, at will. Russia is not producing that large number of shells. I believe not more than 2 million per year. Is totally not enough. They're getting something from Iran, North Korea, probably from China through North Korea. Basically, it's kind of like a replacement scheme, most likely, where China supplies to North Korea, and then North Korea basically supplies theirs to Russia. But it's still not large number. Even if it's 1 million, so it's 3 million, it's totally not enough for this kind of war, for attacking on a large front. So that's why Russian forces are really focused on couple areas. One is being obviously this area west of Bakhmut. The other one is being west of Donetsk, because simply they don't have resources. Mostly they don't have artillery shells. They don't have amount of armor to penetrate, to use this approach, because it's obviously very resource intensive. The way they attack. So it's completely changed from how it used to be in summer of 2022 to where they had tons of shells and have no problem with that. So now what Russian command is doing is they lean on these gliding bombs, which are cheap, and you don't need to make 2 millions of those, but you just make them big. And that really solves the problem, or significantly improves the chances, and effectively it's becoming even cheaper replacement for artillery. And especially if the Ukrainian side is playing this extremely rigid defense, this is a perfect target, because all of these gliding bombs are exactly designed to crush and destroy effectively, efficiently, and very quickly rigid defense. And that's exactly what's happening, and that's significant answer to this sort of newly developed Russian strategies that's working. There is strategy at this point on the Russian side. So now I just want to discuss a little bit of what really happened, because it's just almost discussion that Chasiv Yar is falling into Russian hands and so on. That's not the case. What's really happening is that there is, I would say, it's not really even Chasiv Yar, but sort of suburb of Chasiv Yar that's on the eastern side of this channel. So this is not really core town at all. Core town is where I'm showing very clearly. It's on the western side of this channel. And this was just kind of like overflowing, little bit tiny, tiny quarter of it is on the eastern side. So Russian troops basically, and specifically airborne troops, they approached this outskirt or suburb that's completely remote and almost separated from actual real town. So they just approached that. They breached, as I mentioned, with this like ram attack, Ukrainian defenses, and they approached this outskirt. So they not really initiated a fight for the town. They're not even there. They're not even close, because really to initiate the fight you really need to cross this channel. Then it's really, we're talking about the fight for this town. So it's going to be in a way it's going to be difficult, and it will take a lot of time for Russian side to actually capture Chasiv Yar. But given time, this is obviously will happen. There is no question about it, unless Ukrainian side learns how to do better, how to go away from rigid defense, how to learn how to play active defense, and so on. But that's really requires revolutionary changes in Ukrainian military, which, as long as the same people are in charge of Ukrainian military and Ukrainian political top, that's not going to happen. So effectively, it's fairly safe to extrapolate that this slow-moving disaster will continue happening and unfolding. So what Russian side will really need, they actually need to attack south of Chasiv Yar and north, because that's the most efficient way to capture town, any sort of urban location. That's what Russian side is trying to do. So from that perspective, they actually made advance in exactly the wrong place, because they really don't need to go straight. They really need to go up north and south. So, and that's actually not what's really happening there. So, again, that's in some ways the the eventuality of loss of Chasiv Yar is nearly certain, except it's, I would say, completely overblown by Russian propaganda that this is almost happening in a day or two a week. That's unlikely to happen in that period of time. Also, important part is Ukrainian army, which is, I would say, decaying slowly but surely, losing its quality, losing its morale, losing its motivation, and that is very difficult to quantify. But it's definitely happening, and it's really helping Russian side from that perspective. So that's why it's somewhat, I have some reservations, but I would say the fall of Chasiv Yar is not happening soon. Let's put this way. Then there are some supporting attacks south of this main area of attack, but they were just supporting. There's no real advances there by Russian side. Now let's move to the Central Donbass front line, the main sort of area of Russian attacks and Russian focus. So here the pressure continues. The same concentrated attacks with lots of armor continue against Ukrainian defenses. Russian troops actually managed to capture village Pervomayske. I'll show it on the map. This is like the scale is too high, so it's difficult to show here. But I'll show once we go there. Then they also initiated apparently major attack against this town Krasnohorivka. There's pretty strong pressure there, and they moving through Novomikhailivka slowly but surely. Ukrainian side is losing this town Novomikhailivka. So basically, it's a slow-moving loss by Ukrainian side here that's developing. At some point, it can turn into an avalanche, but so far it's still kind of like in a slow-moving stage. The other important part here that I would like to notice is that this 3rd Brigade is here and defending, and it actually, and 47th, which is also on the better side of Ukrainian troops in terms of morale, organization, just better, generally leadership, it's better. And even then, they cannot really stop effectively Russian advances, which speaks a lot, and it obviously doesn't bode well for Ukrainian forces in general. So that is, I would say, extremely dangerous sign. Now let me show you the sort of advances, what's happening here. So when I mentioned that Russian forces, they captured this village Pervomayske, that's exactly what happened. So they kind of advanced where I'm showing. So this is like sort of Ukrainian forces kept, let's say, 40% of this village Pervomayske. So this whole area now is captured by Russian troops, kind of like triangle in a way. So that's where the main advance at this point happened. Now let's move to the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are more or less, I would say, under control for Ukrainian side, and obviously a lot quieter. There's not much of really real pressure, just kind of like say pressure to distract Ukrainian forces around this Robotina area and then this Novosilka area, but really no major changes here. And then let's finish with the last section of the front line along Dnipro River. Things here remain quiet, no real Russian attacks. I explained last time there is no point for Russian side. They realize Ukrainian forces don't have resources to take advantage of it, and then they don't want to spend their own resources because it's extremely costly to destroy these bridgeheads. And so they basically contained and they moved all of the resources they could to area where they hoping to achieve main advances. So basically, it's very logical. They concentrate resources. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.